Trade planning with the askSlim team. From analysis to the trade idea. What we do is bring you our sum of the evidence analysis. What does that mean? Well, we put together cycle analysis, our proprietary indicators, evaluating the momentum, support resistance levels, how things act around support and resistance levels, and our projections. We put that all together, and what that gives us is a sum of the evidence analysis that allows us to find the most likely occurrences in the market, and that's what we bring you. So I'm going to bring you analysis in gold right now, which in the beginning of the show I said looked like it had changed, and now it's setting up as a long. So this is intermediate outlook that I'm going to show you. And then Katie will bring you DEER, a short trade, intermediate term outlook. Arby's going to bring you Google, a short trade for a short-term outlook. And Matt is going to bring you Square, which is a long trade for a short-term outlook. A little bit confusing when you hear that. Well, we're going to clear it up for you right now. All right, so I'm going to look at the gold market. For those of you that are brand new, this is cycle analysis, where we look at the energies in the markets. On the left is the weekly chart. On the right is the daily chart. And we've had a little bit of shifting here. And you can see specifically on the daily chart right here, where you see that grayed out, or what we call ghosted cycle bracket, and then the dotted one, which is where it has shifted out to the right and a little bit longer. Each of these yellow ovals that you see are the periods where it is late in the cycle. That is where money flows out. So this is a declining phase, a bottoming phase, a rallying or positive phase, and then the peaking phase, which occurs over here. The shape of the cycle is very important to us. The momentum conditions are very important. I have our momentum indicator here on the weekly, which is the reversal scout, and you could see it turning up right over here. And I have the slim ribbon over here, which has been very choppy. When you see the slim ribbon just kind of sitting on itself, it's not giving much in the way of indicators. But when you see it widening and moving up, you can see how positive it is. And when it's widening and moving down, it's negative. And the bars are colored red or green, depending on if it is positive or negative. On the bottom is a slim ribbon PO. And this gives you a good example of how choppy the gold market has been in this corrective period. Let's blow up the weekly chart right over here. And we have upgraded this. And you could see this note, we slightly widened the cycles and shifted slightly to the right. So what does that mean? Well, you can see in here, as we look at this, that the big cycle right over here, or the dominant one right there, is broken up into 3 minor cycles. And you can see 1, 2, and 3 and how that lays out. And now what has just happened is that the first cycle in here extended out just a little bit. That did have me confused, though I said that the likelihood of an upside move is pretty high. I thought it was a second half story, and it still very well may be, but at least now for the intermediate term, this has improved. So if you look at the first of the 3 minor cycles right over here, you can see that that looks pretty similar to what we had here, except this was more of a triangular formation. In our cycle analysis workshop, which you can learn about by going to our front page, you can see that what happened in here is that the minor cycle, when it came down, was meeting the upside forces of the larger one right over here. That is why a triangle formed. As this corrected, but it couldn't go down far, as it came down to close to that 50% retracement and then began to move up. And then it broke out of the triangular formation, which tells us that this new cycle is taking over, joining the upward pressure right over here. It's not exactly what I had expected right now, but that's what's happening, and we are agnostic. We'd let the market tell us what's happening. Momentum improving, breakout of the cycle pattern, now in rising phase, and this means that it's likely to continue higher. Now, resistance is over here, 2120, that other peak at 2152, the 78% extension, 6.8 extension right over here is at just under 2200, and then this one way up over here is at around 2290, close to 2300. So Any of these could be hit right now on this upside. You can see the buying coming in. If interest rates go down as I expect and the dollar goes down, you could expect that gold could go up very sharply in here. So this is a very bullish occurrence when you look at this. So now I'm looking at the shorter term in here, and you can see how this lays out. And again, there's that shifted cycle. The next period of risk begins sometime out over here in late March or early April. So there's a pretty good window for advance right now. Again, this level right over here is at around 21.17. It was 21.20 on the weekly chart. And this one way up over here at that other resistance is at around 21.70. I think there's a pretty good shot that it moves up to 21.70. So the question is, do you buy it today? Do you buy it now under these bullish conditions? Or do you wait? Do you wait for a pullback? Well, that's a hard one for me to say. All I can tell you is that everything I'm looking at is that the momentum is turning positive on the weekly. The cycle is turning up. The momentum here on the daily has gone from bearish to neutral, but has not turned positive yet. And I simply believe that any down days in here are going to be false and temporary and likely to move up again. So I think 21.20 to up here to that high of 21.70 is a very reasonable expectation over these next several weeks. And then some sort of a pullback over here, potentially with a buying opportunity, and then moving up again. You can see I have the peak set over here on the weekly sometime early April. And when I look at this cycle right over here, that one has a trough way out in May. So that says to me that this whole cycle, the next one out over here, could also be a very good upside move. So it could correct over there and be powering to the upside again. So I say this period over here in late March, early April is another buying opportunity. Either way, you can buy it now, you can wait for downticks, you can wait for this buying opportunity over here, but then you face a potential for a runaway market. This is turning into quite a bullish condition. Once this daily turns green over here on the slim ribbon PO and the slim ribbon then begins to widen, that will be an indicator that this could be an upside runaway. Bullish intermediate conditions here in the gold market. That's what I have to say about that. And I'm going to turn this over to Katie. Katie, show them deer.
Okay, so let's start by taking a look at the weekly chart of deer. On the bottom here, we have a 23-week cycle bracket with a weekly cycle timing window that's coming up between April 15th and May 24th. Now let's look at what happened in this last completed cycle. We got a move up out of the cycle low, that low being confirmed by the turn to positive momentum with our proprietary reversal scout. That's this green and purple ribbon. So deer got back up to this area of prior cycle peak, some really strong resistance there. You can see that it's rejected from that level multiple times, right around $450. So strong resistance there. Then we got this bearish engulfing candlestick on earnings, and the reversal scout turned negative. So that helped us to confirm that the cycle peak was in place, and deer declined through all the supports, including the 78.6% fib, almost back down to this cycle low support. So the depth of that decline suggested probabilistically that deer would not be able to make a new high in the next cycle, which is the cycle that we're now in. And you can see that that has played out with deer rising out of this cycle low up into this resistance zone that was created using the prior cycle high and cycle low. Then momentum turned negative, and we have given up the whole move. Last week, deer dipped briefly below the cycle low support, and now trying to get a bit of a mid-cycle bounce. However, based on this pattern and the negative momentum conditions, we would expect rallies to fail, and we have an initial projection down to about the 61.8% extension. That's around 348.25 out in that weekly cycle timing window. So now if we switch over to the daily chart, I will zoom in a little bit. On here, we have a 44-bar cycle, and we are just moving up out of that daily cycle timing window. So this current cycle is due to end in mid-April, which is inside the weekly cycle timing window. Therefore, this cycle is in sync, and you'll see that noted in the in sync box of the cycle low timing tracker. So what that means is that this cycle will be expected to exhibit weakness, possibly even breakdowns, as we form those intermediate and short-term lows. So this prior cycle here was basically flat, ending right where it started. And based on that, we created a resistance zone using that prior cycle high and that cycle low. And that resistance zone is here, and it runs from about 373.50 on the bottom to about 386 on the top with a 78.6% fib. It's not drawn in here, but it is at about 395. So we would expect deer to try to rally up into this zone and then for that rally to fail and move back down. Again, our initial target is this area between the cycle low support at about 353 down to the 61.8% extension off the weekly chart, 348.25. Possibly lower. Please do note that Caterpillar, which has a much stronger pattern, is also due to trough right around this same mid-April timeframe. Now, in terms of askSlim tools that I use to identify this trade idea, first, as I mentioned, the in sync box on the cycle low timing tracker. Second, the Slimulator ranking system, which shows a directional bias in deer of very bearish. Third, the Slimulator momentum tracker, which also shows a directional bias of very bearish. Fourth, if I switch over to the area chart, we have the OBI down here, the option bias indicator sitting at N3, suggesting a bearish bias. And fourth, the market condition indicator, that is this down here, it is sitting at -71 today. So if you'd like to learn more about these tools, please become an askSlim member. Now, in terms of option strategies that you could employ to take advantage of this bearish hypothesis, I would suggest long premium strategies since deer has low implied volatility right now, and those benefit from a pop in implied volatility. So you could do something like a long put or put spread, put zebra if you have enough capital, even a put butterfly. About an hour ago, I published an options trade idea for this analysis for our members, which was a put diagonal spread. So if you would like to see that video, you can also consider becoming a level 3 or 4 member. And I will hand it over to Arvi.
So you should see a weekly and daily chart here of Google with the weekly on the left, daily on the right. Let's pull up the weekly chart. So this is interesting. This is also, quite clearly at this point formed its key intermediate term cycle high right there. And we're looking for this to pull back as it's doing and overall sell off further. On the downside, there's a 61.8 to the 78.6, 133.12 to right around 128. Not unreasonable to really see 128 going into when this weekly cycle low is due. And that's due 318 to right around 429. Okay. We shift over to the daily chart. You can see that this has clearly now turned down. We are watching for bear flags to form and for a rally up into this zone right around 140.60 to 144 or so. If this moves through the 78.6 at 146.60, this would be a loser, and we would be looking for it to turn back down and sell off into this zone here from right around 133.26 to 132.12. A daily cycle low is due 322 to right around 4.5 here in Google. So that's our overall look here at a short-term 1 to 3 week trade idea in Google, and I'll hand this off to you, Matt.
Okay, so in my segment, I'm going to take a look at Square, symbol SQ. Before I get into that, I want to take a quick step back. And as traders, we have to be able to wear multiple hats. We are scientists, we're analysts, and we're strategists. We have to be able to integrate these skills so that we can devise an objective methodology, apply that methodology to produce technical evidence, and then be able to convert that analysis into a trading plan. And that's what you're witnessing as the askSlim team goes through their process. There are no certainties. However, your methodology should put the odds of your trade setup in your favor, and then you have your money management rules to control your risk. So as Slim mentioned, I'm looking at Square here. I have a long side bias in a 2 to 4 week outlook. On the top here, I've posted a little sticky note that we focus on a lot here at askSlim, and that is our trade planning process, the questions, the outlook period, the directional bias, our key levels. And then once we have that sum of the evidence, does that then suggest we actually have a tradable edge? And then what signals are needed to suggest that setup is a go? So I'm on the weekly chart here of Square, and I'm going to step through why I have a long side or bullish bias. What is that technical evidence that is suggesting that this is the case at this time? So number one on the weekly chart, I'm going to actually back this up here so we can look at what happened here in Square, which had a massive sell-off that started in essentially 2021 of around August, and that lasted more than 9 months as it completed here out in about June, and then had gone sideways for about another year. And then we had basically a capitulation sell-off here that ended in late October. Well, what's happening now is that there has been a significant positive repair that has taken place in this most recent cycle that I'm going to zoom in on here, which is giving me the conviction of the overall bullish bias. So you can see here that we finished this cycle actually in a negative overall configuration and structure. However, in this rising phase that occurred in this new cycle, it was extremely bullish, and we actually repaired the negative overall structure when we came through that 78.6, which I will draw here from the swing high here of the prior cycle peak down to that swing low where the trough occurred. And you can see that we had multiple weeks on a closing basis above that 78.6, which had repaired then that overall cycle structure. On the pullback that we have had still during this overall rising, now peaking phase, it just got into that that first part of the support zone that we identify on the weekly chart. And more recently, we have seen the reversal scout weekly momentum indicator turn up as Square or Block released its earnings, and we see that momentum again turn up. So the overall, some of the evidence here on the weekly chart is with this recent cycle peak resistance breakout, overall cycle structure positive, momentum positive. We now have an overall bullish bias on the intermediate time frame. And I'm going to go over now to the daily chart. And it's within the daily chart that you can really get a sense of the more granular details. And this is really important that you are capable and have access to the right charting time frames and indicators that match up to your outlook period. So as I mentioned, I'm looking at more of a short term, but still 2 to 4 week outlook. And if I'm doing that, I really want to get into that daily chart time frame to be able to see some of those deeper details. So what we have going on here in the daily chart is that we wrapped up this daily cycle here, and it was fairly it was a very, very choppy scenario here, and we actually had a early low that came into place. We had one up day, and then we exploded higher on earnings. So that earnings report has pushed it above the prior cycle peak, both on the daily and on the weekly, shifting that cycle structures positive. Overall momentum now on the daily is also positive. You can see how, as Slim mentioned too, once that slim ribbon starts to expand out, it really does then let you know that something has changed and there's a strong momentum trend in place. So we would expect that slim ribbon to act as support if it does pull back into there. Right now, it's really holding and consolidating that initial rally explosive pop gap that it had off of earnings. So now what we're looking at is, I'm looking at here, since we are still in the early rising phase, essentially, there's a lot of time in this cycle for to continue in its upward advance. And that upward advance, that up leg has likely already started in that intermediate time frame. So over the next 2 to 4 weeks, I'm looking for a move into this first projection zone of around 87 to 90 with an outside chance as you get further out, maybe into that 3 or 4 week period of getting up into the secondary projection zone of 90 to 94. Now, where this comes from is the swing low, swing high analysis techniques that we use. So if we go back to the weekly chart here, and we use this cycle trough here low, and then that initial cycle peak here we call this our minor cycle peak, and then the trough that was put in, and you can see that we have a first projection extension of 61.8 up here around 87, and then you get into that minor fib extension target zone of that 78.6 to 100. So that is what it would look like on that intermediate time frame. And then when you zoom in here on the daily, you can see that that first target zone of about 87 to 90. The reevaluation levels come in. If we see a close below 71, that would require me to reevaluate that upside projection. So I don't want to see a close below 71, which would be just below right now, that slim ribbon. And then if it breaks the 78.6 of this cycle low to this current cycle peak here that is not the peak yet, we don't know that, but this is the high so far in the cycle. If we got a breakdown below that, that would warn me that the over alongside bias is in jeopardy. So that's what I'm looking at in an overall some of the evidence perspective. And then when it comes to what signals suggest the trade setup is a go, we have our multi-time frame grid here going from left to right, a weekly chart, a daily chart, a 2-hour chart, and a 15-minute. Since our directional bias is driven by our weekly chart and our daily chart, and on both of those, as I've already explained, it is a very positive overall conditions. Then I would look at the 2-hour to give me some signals in terms of potential resumption opportunities. That would be the slim ribbon PO firing. That would be also if the reversal scout turns back up, that would suggest to me that there's likely another up leg in motion. This is a scenario where over the next week or two, there could be some pullbacks, but ultimately based on the current structures and momentum, we should see that continuation of the overall upside advance. That's a look at Square. Back to you, Slim.
All right, that was fantastic. Great work, team. Just a really good example of the type of analysis we do. Of course, we encourage all the viewers to become members if you're not, or upgrade to get some of these features that we're using, and you'll be able to work the analysis that we show and also do your own analysis and see how your analysis lines up with what we're bringing. So great work. That's it for our trade planning session with the askSlim team for this week.